I didn't plan this trip for long. Honestly, it wasn't much of a plan at all. I just woke up one Friday and realized I couldn't take another weekend of car horns, late night shouting from the street, and the glow of screens keeping me wired when I was supposed to be asleep. My brain felt fried. I needed quiet. So I started throwing things into the back of my car. A tent I'd barely used, a sleeping bag, a couple cans of soup, a pocket knife I bought years ago but never carried. No checklist, no gear upgrades, just whatever I could grab in 10 minutes. I didn't even tell anyone I was leaving. Didn't text friends, didn't post online. I just wanted to be gone. The drive out of the city dragged. The traffic lights, the endless stop and go, felt like they were daring me to turn back. But eventually the buildings thinned, the billboards disappeared, and the roads stretched open. Cornfields on one side, tree lines on the other. No sound but the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle when the road cracked under the tires. For the first time in months, I started to breathe easier. The noise of the city was behind me. What I didn't know then was that something else was waiting ahead. By the time I pulled off the highway, the sky had already started to fade into that late evening gray. I spotted a flickering neon sign and decided to stop before it got too dark. The place was small, just a squat building with 2 trucks parked outside, buzzing lights, and a couple of flies circling the door. Inside, the diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions. A ceiling fan clicked lazily overhead and a handful of stools lined the counter. There weren't many people, just one guy in a ball cap nursing pie and a waitress who looked like she'd been there all day. She gave me a polite nod when I slid onto a stool. "Headed somewhere?" she asked while pouring me coffee, even though I hadn't ordered it yet. "Camping," I said. "Couple of nights out in the North Woods. Just needed to get out of the city." Her hand froze for half a second. Coffee pot still tilted. "North side?" "Yeah, past Miller's Creek. I found a clearing marked on the map." She set the pot down slow, like she was choosing her next words carefully. "That's Gray Moon Hollow out there," I frowned. "Never heard of it." "Most people haven't," she said flatly. "Locals don't go there. Not when the moon looks wrong." I tried to laugh it off, but something about her tone made me uneasy. "Wrong how?" She didn't answer. Just walked away to wipe down a table that was already clean. I finished my sandwich in silence, the unease sitting heavier than the food in my stomach. I left the diner with the taste of burnt coffee still on my tongue, and her words stuck in my head. Gray Moon Hollow. It sounded like something out of a campfire story, not a place on an actual map. I told myself she was just trying to spook a stranger. Small towns have their quirks. The last stretch of road was nothing but cracked asphalt that eventually turned to gravel, then dirt. My headlights cut through tall grass and low-hanging branches. Every so often, a mailbox would appear on the side of the road, leaning crooked but no houses. By the time I reached the turnoff, the sun was gone. The dirt path into the woods looked more like a trail than a road, half swallowed by weeds. My car bounced hard over ruts and rocks until finally the trees pressed in so close I decided to stop. I killed the engine, and just like that, everything went silent. No crickets, no frogs, not even the rustle of leaves. It was so quiet my ears rang. I grabbed my pack from the trunk and switched on my flashlight. The beam swung across tree trunks and tangled brush, throwing shadows that seemed to twitch when I wasn't looking directly at them. Overhead, the moon hung low. Not bright, not silver like it should have been, but dull like it was coated in ash. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Something about it made my stomach knot. I adjusted the strap of my pack and told myself it was just a moon. Just the woods. Just a weekend. And then I stepped into the trees. The trail wound deeper than I expected, but after a while I found a small patch of ground that looked flat enough to pitch a tent. It was ringed with tall pines, the kind that swallow light even during the day. By night they felt like walls. I dropped my pack, unrolled the tent, and fought with the poles for a good 10 minutes. It wasn't pretty. One side sagged lower than the other, but it stood. Good enough. I set up my little stove and boiled water for noodles. The flame hissed quietly, the only real sound around me. I ate sitting cross-legged in the cold dirt, steam rising from the cup into the air. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Then I noticed it again. The quiet. It wasn't just silence, it was the kind of silence that feels wrong. No insects buzzing, no owls calling, no far-off rustle of something moving through the brush, just dead air pressing against my ears. I told myself maybe it was the season. Maybe the cold drove everything off. Still, the longer I sat there, the heavier it felt. When I finally climbed into the tent, zipped the flap, and slid into my sleeping bag, I thought the walls of nylon would help. But the quiet followed me inside. Every shift of fabric was too loud. My breathing echoed like I was in a cave. My heart thumped so hard I swore something outside could hear it. I must have laid there an hour, staring into the dark, trying to convince myself I'd eventually drift off. My eyelids felt heavy, but every time I was close to slipping under, the silence would yank me back awake. And then it came. 3 knocks against the side of the tent. Not loud, not frantic, just steady knock, knock, knock. I froze. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe a branch had fallen. Maybe the wind pushed something against the fabric. But there was no wind. No rustle of leaves. Nothing but those 3 perfect taps. I slid my hand across the floor of the tent until my fingers closed around the pocket knife. I held it so tight the handle dug into my skin. My ears strained in the dark, waiting for more. But after those 3 knocks, there was nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. Just that awful, crushing silence. I stayed like that all night, knife in hand, eyes wide open, every muscle locked tight. Sleep never came. When daylight finally bled through the thin fabric of the tent, I unzipped the flap and stepped out, stiff from staying frozen all night. The air was colder than it should have been, damp enough that my breath puffed in front of me. At first, everything looked normal. Trees, dirt, my little stove tipped on its side where I'd left it. Then I glanced down at the ground just a few feet from the tent. That's when I saw them. Impressions in the soil. Not footprints. Not paw prints. Just deep, round marks pressed straight into the dirt, like something heavy had stood there for a long time. Too wide for boots. Too deep for deer. I crouched down and pressed my fingers into one of the marks. The soil was still soft, like it hadn't been long since it was made. My stomach twisted. Instinct kicked in. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. When I checked the screen, the image looked fogged over, blurred like I'd smeared the lens with grease. I wiped it clean and tried again. Same result. The marks were clear as day in front of me, but my phone refused to capture them. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at those impressions, feeling like I wasn't supposed to be seeing them at all. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and tried to laugh it off. Maybe the dirt just sank funny, maybe the camera glitched. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. I decided to take a walk, clear my head. The path twisted through the trees, narrow and uneven, with patches of light breaking through the canopy. For a while it almost felt normal, just me in the woods, but then I started noticing it. Every time I lifted my eyes, something dark would slip out of sight between the trunks. Tall, thin, always gone the second I focused on it. I stopped once, spun in a full circle, flashlight in hand even though it was broad daylight. Nothing there, just trees and shadows. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was pacing me, just beyond the edges of what I could see. The longer I walked, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't just silence anymore, it was pressure. Like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave. By the time I circled back to camp, my nerves were raw. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired from the night before. But the way the trees seemed to lean closer, the way the shadows stretched too far, it didn't feel like imagination. That night I sat inside the tent with my knife laid across my lap, the flashlight propped against my pack so the beam pointed toward the ceiling. I told myself nothing would happen. I told myself the knocking was just a trick of nerves. But around midnight I heard it, footsteps, not rushing, not stumbling. Just slow, steady steps crunching in the dirt outside. They circled the tent. I could hear them fade, then return on the opposite side like something was pacing, measuring the space around me. My chest tightened with each pass. Sometimes they got closer, close enough that I swore I could hear fabric shift from the weight pressing against the ground. Other times they pulled back, then crept in again, and then came the breathing. It wasn't steady like a person's, it dragged, rough and uneven, as if whatever was out there couldn't quite figure out how to do it right. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I sat frozen in the dim light of the tent, listening as it walked, circled, paused, and then started again. The silence between each set of steps was worse than the sound itself, because I never knew which direction it would come from next. I tried to steady my breathing, to convince myself it was just an animal. Maybe a coyote, maybe a deer nosing around, but deep down I already knew better. The footsteps slowed until they stopped right outside the tent wall. For a few seconds, everything went still, and then I heard it. A whisper. At first, it was just a scrape of sound, too soft to make out, but then it shaped itself into something clear. Something unmistakable. It said my name, not shouted, not even spoken loud, just breathed out, low and stretched, like it was testing the syllables. My skin went cold. I hadn't told anyone I was coming out here. Nobody knew where I was. I hadn't spoken my own name out loud since I left the city, but somehow it knew. I clenched the knife so hard my hand ached, staring at the nylon wall inches from my face. Every instinct screamed to unzip the flap and look, but I couldn't. If I did, I was afraid of what I'd see, or worse, what I wouldn't. The whisper came again, dragging the letters slower this time, like it was enjoying the sound. I stayed frozen, listening until the night swallowed it back into silence. By morning, I looked like hell. My eyes burned from not sleeping, and my body felt like it had been clenched in one position all night. I should have packed up, thrown everything in the trunk, and left. That would have been the smart move, but I didn't. Some part of me wanted answers. I kept telling myself maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my brain was just fried from stress and exhaustion. But another part of me needed to know how far it would go. So I stayed. The day passed in a blur. I barely ate. I sat around camp watching the tree line, listening to the wind or the lack of it. Every so often I thought I saw movement, a shadow too tall to be a man slipping between trunks. Never close enough to make out, always there just long enough to knot my stomach. By nightfall, the dread was heavier than ever, but I still zipped myself inside the tent. I kept the knife close, flashlight ready. My heart was already racing, like my body knew what was coming. And it did come. But this time, it wasn't outside. Around midnight, the air inside the tent shifted. It was sudden, like someone had flipped a switch. 1 second it was just cool night air, the next it was freezing. My breath came out in clouds, hanging white in the beam of the flashlight. Then I felt it. Not outside. Inside me. A low vibration started in my chest, deep and slow, like a growl caught beneath my ribs. It rattled through my bones, made my teeth buzz against each other. My heartbeat went wild, slamming so hard I thought it might break free. I pressed a hand against my sternum, thinking I was having a panic attack. But that wasn't it. This wasn't me. This was something else. Something using me like I was just a hollow shell it could shake. The sound grew, filling me until I thought my bones would crack apart. My skin was slick with cold sweat, my jaw clenched so tight it ached, and then it stopped. Everything went dead still. No sound, no breath. Not even the whisper of wind through the trees. Just silence thick enough to choke on. That's when the shadow passed over the tent. The moonlight vanished, blocked out by something tall, too tall to be human, standing right outside. The fabric of the tent shivered as if something brushed against it. I held my breath, every muscle locked. The nylon was thin, just a sheet between me and whatever stood outside. Then came the sound, a claw at least. That's what it had to be, dragging slow across the side of the tent. Skrrch. The noise crawled up my spine. It didn't tear the fabric. It didn't push through. It just scraped, long and deliberate, like it wanted me to know it could. I tightened my grip on the knife until my hand hurt. My flashlight beam trembled against the tent ceiling, flickering as the batteries strained. I couldn't tell if I was shaking or if the light was. The shadow stayed there, blocking out the moon, unmoving except for that steady scrape of claw against nylon. I wanted to scream, to bolt out, to do something. But I couldn't, my body refused. I was locked in place, listening to it trace slow lines along the wall, and then it stopped. No movement, no sound. Just that crushing silence, pressing in, waiting. That was the moment I knew. If I didn't run now, I'd never leave this place. I snapped. My body moved before my brain could argue. I shoved the knife into my pocket, grabbed my pack, and kicked the tent flap open so hard it nearly ripped. Cold night air slammed into me, but I didn't stop. I bolted into the clearing, flashlight beam swinging wild across the trees. The forest was dead quiet. No wind, no insects, no sound but my boots pounding the dirt and the ragged gasps tearing out of my throat. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Some instinct told me if I turned my head, I'd see it standing there, or worse, I wouldn't. Branches whipped against my arms and face as I crashed through the brush. My legs burned, muscles screaming, but I pushed harder. The silence pressed right up against me, like it was chasing without making a sound. The beam of my flashlight jerked and shook, catching glimpses of trees, broken logs, patches of empty ground. None of it felt real anymore. The only thing that mattered was forward, away, fast. When the shape of my car finally came into view through the trees, I nearly sobbed with relief. My knees wobbled, ready to give out, but I forced myself to keep running. I stumbled into the clearing, nearly tripping as I yanked the driver's side door open and threw myself inside. My hands fumbled with the keys, slick with sweat slipping against the metal. The engine coughed once. Died. Come on, come on, come on, I muttered, twisting the key again. My chest felt like it was caving in, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The headlights flickered, then cut on, and that's when I saw it. At the tree line, just beyond the reach of the beams, something stood, tall, wrong, still. The shadows clung to it, but I could see the outline. Too thin, too high, its head bent at an angle that didn't make sense. For just a second it didn't move, didn't breathe, it only watched. My throat closed up. Then like smoke and wind, it was gone. The engine roared to life and I slammed my foot down on the gas. The car jerked forward, bouncing and rattling down the dirt road as if the whole forest wanted to shake me loose. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down until the dirt gave way to pavement, and I didn't breathe easy until I saw the first glow of streetlights on the horizon. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, the sun was bleeding into the sky. I sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, hands locked on the wheel, engine ticking as it cooled. The city looked normal. Cars passed. People walked dogs. Everything was fine, at least on the surface. But nights are different now. When I lay down, I don't listen for traffic outside or the hum of appliances. I listen for silence, that heavy, choking silence from the woods. And sometimes, when the wind slips through the trees near my building, I hear it again. Faint, careful, like a whisper. Sometimes, it even sounds like my name. I told the story once at a bar just to get it off my chest. An old guy down the counter turned pale and muttered, "Gray Moon Hollow." I nodded. Yeah, that's where it happened. He shook his head, eyes fixed on his drink. Folks around here don't give it a name. They just call it the Gray Moon thing.